Hi everyone, a very good afternoon, and I welcome you all to the series first webinar of the WRI webinar series at this point of time. We all know that we are going through, all of us are going through a little bad time, and the pathogen has gone beyond what it should have gone, what it should have been. So, in this, it has impacted all, day-to-day life and all the sectors of economy and everything. So in this backdrop, WRI is doing a series of webinars themed as Build Back Better. And this is the first one of that, in which we are going to discuss the impact of the recently announced farm sector reforms in Indian agriculture, rural economy, and related sectors. It nowadays doesn't need any kind of an instruction to join and participate in a webinar, but still, we will be recording this and we will be making it available. The whole discussion will be made available through WRI website. And for an efficient management, we are restricting the camera, the audio and video for the panelists, and all other participants, it will be disabled. But you have chat window and also the question answer window to reach to us. Any kind of technical issues or problem, please use the chat window, and please reach to us with your questions at any point of time through the question answer window. We will be consolidating this and we'll be passing to the panelists to respond after the initial rounds. Within in a very small time, I would like to briefly introduce you to the panelists we have today and also welcome them officially. We have Mr. Jugal Kishore Mahapatra, who was 1979 batch IAS officer, who worked long time with Government of India and also with Government of Odisha. And he was the secretary for Ministry of Rural Development for quite a good time. More than that, he was instrumental in implementing some of the well-known flagship programs in India, like Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme, MGNREGA, Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, Indira Awas Yojana, National Rural Livelihood Mission. So whole flagship programs, Mr. Mahapatra is behind it. So we are very glad to get him as a panelist today. Welcome you, sir. We have Ms. Loka Nath, who is the Executive Director of India Climate Collaborative, and she also leads sustainability portfolio of Tata Trust, which is focusing on climate, energy, environment, and all. And she's also co-founded and was the managing partner of Sankhya Women Impact Fund. And nevertheless, to say that she's an angel investor in social and social enterprises and has mentored many organizations across the sector during the last quite a few years. Thank you for joining us, Loka. We also have Ms. Saroj Kashikarji, who is a veteran farm activist from Maharashtra. She's a member and ex-head of Shektari Sangatana, which is a non-political union of farmers founded with aim for freedom of access to market and technology. Shektari Sangatana is based on the notion that the terms of trade between the industry and agriculture are lopsided and in favor of the industry. And it's very important for us, Sarojji, you to have with us today, because the recent reforms are much more market oriented, and we would like to get your opinion more on that. Thank you for joining us. Welcome. We have Mr. Harish Damodaran. He doesn't need an introduction, I would say. Most of us are coming across his writings and analysis on a day-to-day basis in Indian Express. He's the national editor for rural affairs and agriculture with Indian Express. More than that, he's very well known as an author of his book, which really describes the ethnic origin and evolution of business community in India. The book named India's New Capitalists, Caste, Business, and Industry in a Modern Nation. Harish has been already recognized well in the sector, and he has been awarded with World Food Day Award in 2000 by United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization and Indian Association for Advancement of Science. Thank you for joining us, Harish. Finally, we have Dr. Opi Agarwal, the current CEO of WRI India, and he's also the 1979 batch IAS officer, worked in center and also in Assam state government for quite a bit of time. And he also worked in the World Bank for around 6 years as their global urban transport advisor operating from Washington, DC. and he is engaged with WRI from 2017 onwards. Thank you all the panelists. I welcome all the participants who have shown keen interest and taken time to join us today. And let us look towards a very fruitful and informative discussion. By this, the floor is to the panelists. I request Dr. O.P. Agarwal to moderate the whole discussion. Thank you very much. Once again, welcome everyone.
Thanks, Jayhari. Thanks for that excellent introduction. And again, a welcome from my side to all the panelists and all the participants. It's very heartening to see that we have 115 participants, and I'm really delighted that the panelists could find time to join us for this. Really thankful to you. So as I had, what we will do in this next about an hour and 15 minutes or so is I'll first request all of you to make a brief opening statement for about a minute or two on what you think are some of the key challenges being faced in the agricultural sector for the farmers and all that. And after a first opening 1 or 2 minutes, then I will come up with a few questions for each of you. And after that, we'll open it up to the house for any questions that Jayhari will help in moderating and directing those questions to each of the panelists. And finally, we will close with a minute or two's closing statement for each of you. But just by way of introduction, there have been the last stimulus package, the third tranche of the stimulus package, as they call it, had two very important recommendations as far as the agricultural sector is concerned. One of them was an amendment to the Essential Commodities Act. And under this amendment, you had cereals, edible oils, oilseeds, pulses, onions, and potatoes removed from the purview of the Essential Commodities Act. That I think was a very interesting and something that many organizations have been arguing in favor of. This is something that has come about. The second very important change that has happened is that they are no longer bound to sell under the agricultural marketing cooperatives that existed. Today, farmers are in a position to sell to anyone that they like. I know the same thing happened somewhere around the early 90s with tea and coffee industry. Earlier, coffee had to be sold only to the coffee board, and tea could only be sold through an auction in the tea board. And there was a lot of demand for these to be opened up. That happened around 92 or so. And thereafter, we've seen a huge change in the tea and coffee market in India. Are we likely to see something like that because of this liberalization in the agricultural sector? So broadly, that is the change that has happened. But let me now move to you to give us a few opening, a minute or so of your opening comments on this before we get to the questions. Why don't I start with you, Shloka?
Thanks, OP. Thank you for inviting me today and this illustrious panel. It's a really, really important topic. And I think just on the subject of the reforms, that's probably the best place to start. I very much welcome the reforms, and I think that they will cut down on archaic regulations. I think they will help raise farm gate prices. They will unify domestic markets as well as integrate the farm economy into a more sort of global value chain. I think the big focus is really on new ideas to intervene in the agriculture marketing system so as to make them freer. So I think if all three reforms are proposed and if they are implemented efficiently and in a farm-centric manner, they will free producers from the clutches of middlemen and trader cartels, open new channels, foster investments and competition in the agri-supply chain. And I think that will ultimately improve farmer income and increase rural resilience. Having said that, though, I do want to point out that there is some contextual information which really needs to sort of frame these proposed reforms. And that is that the reforms, number one, are largely focused on agri-marketing and not on production. Agriculture is still a state subject. And so it really remains to be seen how each state will respond. And I know we have Jugalji here who will, of course, provide a huge amount of perspective on that. So there is, states derive revenue from the mandi tax, which will be reduced. So there is, conflict there. So I think while longer term sort of reforms have been proposed across these three different tranches, immediate relief measures to farmers are also, that have been hit really hard by the curbs on movement right now and the transport of goods under COVID-19, that's missing. So I think, overall, it's a step in the right direction, but there are obviously gaps that we need to cover. And I expect over the next hour and 15 minutes, we'll dive deep into those.
Thanks, Shloka. Can I now move to Saroj ji? Saroj ji, आपसे कुछ अगर सुनना चाहें आप.
जी, मैं ये दोनों सुधार के पक्ष में हूँ. किसान कई सालों से ये दोनों सुधार की रास्ता देख रहा था, लेकिन मैं साशंक हूँ. 1992 में जिस तरह से खुलीकरण आया था, ओपननेस आया था, लेकिन बाद में वो किसानों को नसीब नहीं हुआ. तो सर, इसके बाद ये आने वाले जो भी रिफॉर्म्स है, ये रिफॉर्म्स हम किसानों के लिए हमेशा के लिए होंगे या स्टेट और केंद्र के बीच में हम फिर से पिस जाएंगे? जो भी कुछ है कि हमको विद इन स्टेट या स्टेट के बाहर भी हम लोग हमारा माल बेच सकते, ला सकते, तो ये सब करने के लिए हमें स्वतंत्रता ही चाहिए थी. जब हमारे देश में किसी चीज की उपज कम होती है तो तुरंत हम पर यह कानून लाकर हमारा खरीद बेच बंद कर दी जाती है, वो जीवन आवश्यक वस्तु है करके. सर, मैं एक सवाल पूछना चाहती हूँ प्याज के बारे में कि प्याज क्या जीवन आवश्यक वस्तु है? प्याज ना खाने से हम में से कोई मर गया ऐसा हमने कभी सुना है? लेकिन फिर भी अगर हमें प्याज के ज्यादा दाम बाहर देश से मिल रहे थे तो हमारे प्याज के बिक्री पर, निर्यात पर बैन लाया गया और प्याज का किसान खून के आंसू रोने लगा. सर, इस तरह इस सुधारणा के साथ ना हो. हम तो खुशी खुशी इसका स्वागत कर रहे हैं. क्या हमें भी व्यापार करना है? क्योंकि हमें शरद जोशी ने कहा था कि सीता शेती, माझघर शेती, व्यापार शेती और निर्यात शेती, ये 3 कृषि, अगर 4 पद्धति की कृषि अगर किसान ने किया तो किसान आत्मनिर्भर बन सकता है. इस देश की अर्थव्यवस्था की सही माने में रीढ़ की हड्डी किसान है सर. लेकिन हर बार उसको बाजू में रख दिया गया, उसके तरफ किसी ने ध्यान नहीं दिया. चलो, देर आए दुरुस्त आए, गवर्नमेंट अगर ये सुधार कर रही है तो मुझे खुशी है. लेकिन महाराष्ट्र में ऐसे ही एपीएमसी का कानून उठने के लिए प्रावधान किया गया था, लेकिन तुरंत सरकार को अध्यादेश लाकर वह बंद करना पड़ा. किसानों का आंदोलन शायद इस बारे में कम पड़ता है या किसानों की आवाज कम पड़ती है क्या? ये बार बार हम सोचते हैं कि हम कई बार कह रहे हैं दरवाजा खटखटाकर हर सरकार से कि एसेंशियल कमोडिटी एक्ट यह हमारे लिए घातक है. हमें खुली व्यवस्था चाहिए. हमें भी जिस तरह बाकी के उद्योजक अपना अपना व्यवसाय व्यापार करते हैं, उस तरह हमें भी अपना व्यवसाय व्यापार, अपनी खेती करने की खुली छूट दी जाए. सर, हम देश के हित में ही हर काम करेंगे. इतना ही मैं कहना चाहती हूँ. धन्यवाद.
Thank you, Saroj. Can I now move to Hari? Hari, just an opening statement of what you think about these reforms and the problems in the agriculture sector.
I think we'll come to the reforms a little later, but let us look at the present situation. I'll give you 2 examples. This is the first time I'm buying tomatoes at 15 rupees per kg in peak summer. Okay? ये तो कभी नहीं हुआ है या शायद हुआ है. तो आप सोचिए, तो टमाटर जो है, it is not a summer vegetable. और हम लोग जो है 15 रुपया, आज सुबह मैं लिया 15 रुपया. ठीक है, पता नहीं किसान को क्या मिला होगा. Okay, this is something very unique which has happened this season. Same milk in March शुरुआत में, सरोज जी जानते होंगे कि महाराष्ट्र में जो था गाय का दूध 3.5% फैट और 8.5% एसएनएफ का, उस टाइम पे जो दाम जो था, वहां के डेयरी लोग दे रहे थे 31 रुपया, 32 रुपया, 31-32 rupees. Today now it is 20 rupees. है ना सरोज जी, आप जानते होंगे. Same thing, buffalo milk, 6.5% fat. Okay, in March, early March, it was something like, it was 45 rupees, 46 rupees. Now it is 30-31 rupees. Again, in summer milk production is supposed to fall, and prices are supposed to rise. Whereas you are seeing the opposite. So in today's situation, what we are seeing is a complete demand collapse. Okay, demand collapse. So I think we should first look at that problem today. Okay, and I would say that Essential Commodities Act, etc., what they have done, it's a supply side reform. It is a correct reform. It is a very good reform. But immediately अभी जो है किसान का जो है main problem जो है उसका ये है कि demand नहीं है. And the reason for it is a lot of demand is institutional demand. You know, hotels, dhaba, restaurant, mithai, whatever, sweet meat, this thing. You look at जैसे चना आप देखिए, चना हम लोग either as उसको दाल में खाते हैं या उसको जो है बेसन बनाते हैं, बेसन से बेसन लड्डू बनता है, ठीक है. Now if you go and same if you look at even milk, you know, part of it is converted into खोआ and मावा. अब देखिए गुलाब जामुन नहीं बिक रहा है, सारे मिठाई वाले बंद हैं. So if you see आइसक्रीम नहीं है. So I will say about 25% of the market has now collapsed. So I think we should first focus on this demand problem, which is immediate. We will discuss this thing a little later on the supply side reforms.
Okay. Thanks, Harish. Finally, Jugal.
Thank you. I think some of the basic issues have already been flagged, and I'll just briefly mention my endorsement to some of the major problems have already been highlighted. I think the sector has many problems, but two I would like to mention in the opening statement. First is the problem of unremunerated prices, which Harish mentioned, and it is not today. It has been happening for quite some time. Over the last 4 or 5 years, I think this has been a problem that Indian farmers have faced all across. So how do we correct that trend? The terms of trade which has moved against agriculture, which Sarojji also mentioned some time back. So the terms of trade correction is something that we need to address. Secondly, I think the issue of the distorted input markets and the output markets, both. So on the one hand, you have very serious distortion in land, in various basic inputs, water, electricity, and all that. And output markets are extremely fragmented, very unorganized, and therefore the farmers don't benefit. So these are some of the basic problems. And against this backdrop, we need to consider what these reforms will unfold for the farmers. How will it change the fortunes of the farmers? Thank you.
Thank you, Jugal. I think very interesting opening statements. You've really moved between an immediate problem in the backdrop of the pandemic, and some of you have also spoken about a wider, longer-term problem that persists with the industry itself, with the whole sector itself. So what Harish was mentioning about tomato prices and milk prices are perhaps because of the demand contraction that has taken place in the COVID scenario. And what Jugal and Shloka and even Sarojji mentioned was also a little more around the larger problems being faced by the entire sector. But with these, now let me go to the second round with some questions for each of you. And here, let me reverse the order. Let me start with Jugal. Could you tell us a little bit, you've been in the Ministry of Rural Development, you've seen things from a policy angle for quite some time. And in that backdrop, could you tell us what are some of the key problems of stagnant growth that are seen in this industry? What is it that is causing that kind of thing? And what are some of the key issues that the reforms that have recently been announced, how will these reforms address some of the key problems that you see? Then, of course, there is another thing that Shloka mentioned, and if you can even respond to that, it is, after all, a state subject. If it is a state subject, what do you see? You've been chief secretary in a state, you've seen what the state situation is like, you've been in the national government so where do you see the states coming in on this? To what extent do you see them buying into all of this? Your thoughts on all this? I'll say about 6 or 7 minutes, 7, 8 minutes, if you can respond to these.
Okay, I think we all, in the earlier days when we were students, whenever discussions came to agriculture, we all used to remember Indian agriculture is a gamble in the rains. Paradoxically, today we have a situation, if there is a bad monsoon, there is a problem, huge problem. And if you have good monsoons, you have a problem, and bigger problem. So I think that's the paradox that has happened. For a long period, the Indian policy on agriculture focused on how to increase yield. the green revolution and whole lot, per hectare land productivity through various seed input interventions. But we forgot that to the farmer, what matters is not the per hectare productivity, but how much money he gets from his farm. And therefore, when we look at his return from farming, then there is a very big difference. So prices have become more important. So from productivity, now the problem is prices. So you have in a good monsoon, you have huge production of various produce, not just produce and even milk and other things. But the farmers don't get the prices which covers their cost of production and gives them a decent rate of return. You know, you see the NABARD survey of farmers, the average income per month of a farm household is less than 9,000 rupees, which I think unorganized sector earns also everywhere. A basic thing, it's entry-level salary. So the farm has become very unremunerative as an occupation. And the second problem that we need to look at is you have a whole lot of wrong incentives being provided, which has distorted the production choice. So what crops should be grown where has been complete, there is a complete mismatch. You have water abundant eastern region where you should be growing paddy and sugarcane. You don't really grow because there is no market support. On the other hand, you have serious water scarcity, groundwater depletion, and what have you, and you grow all the year after year paddy and sugarcane in those, or cotton in those areas. So I think the factor pricing also is an issue that needs to be addressed. Something is very related to sustainability actually. So if you want sustainable agriculture, you need to correct distortions in the factor markets, not just in the output market. The third problem that I would like to mention is the technology fatigue. You know, we had this green revolution, marvelous green revolution, which bailed us out in a moment of crisis. And today, somehow, we are self-sufficient. We have mountains of food grains. We can look after ourselves without bothering about imports. But today, I think in many crops, our yield levels are far lower compared to the international levels. And particularly China, also rice are only producing the same thing. So possibly we have to be very conservative in our technology, opening the technology, Why should you deny the benefit of science and technology to the farmers, which will really benefit not just the farmers, but the country as a whole? So that's an issue that also we need to debate. And finally, I think the issue of land ownership. We talked about land reforms way back in 50s and 60s. We pay lip service to land reforms once in a while as if it's a ritual. But there is a last mile land reforms issue which has remained pending for a long time. The true cultivator does not get the recognition legally. He does cultivate land, which is illegal. So the problem of concealed tenancy is something also has not been possibly addressed in this tranche of reforms, much as I would have liked to see that thing. Now, coming to what these reforms can offer, we have mentioned that EC Act. I'm sure the other panelists will mention the much promised agriculture central law on agricultural trade, interstate agriculture trade, which I shall mention a little bit. And the third, a little bit unclear, but most people believe that it is about a contract farming law. So I hope I'm correct in that. I'm not sure, but perhaps that's the direction that the hint was given. Now, let me mention about the Agri-Trade Act, because that point was mentioned in the opening statement. Now, traditionally, we have all believed that agriculture is a state subject in the state list, entry 26 and a couple of other entries, markets and fairs and all that. Therefore, the states have all authority to enact laws, frame regulations to regulate agricultural activities. But all these laws are subject to a limitation of entry 33 of the concurrent list. So there is an entry, there is an opening in entry 33 of the concurrent list of 7 schedule, where the center has powers to enact some laws to regulate interstate trade in agriculture and other commodities, and which is what possibly the central government has taken advantage of. Now, basically what it would mean is that there will be less barriers to interstate trade, which is now there. The farmers can't get the benefit of best prices, the optimal prices. Now, question is whether states will come on board, and that's a very valid question. After all, the states have considerable presence in the landscape that the farmers are actually there. Now, the problem, conceptually, there should not be any major conflict, provided you have a more cooperative approach to the law and to its implementation. Basically, what it would mean is that the APMC Act can be there, the mandis can operate, but within the limits laid down by the law. The states would continue to get the mandi fees, there would be no problem in that. But the interstate movement, interstate trade will be regulated under the new law, and both can be harmonized. But for that to happen, I think, please remember that the traders or the aggregators or the companies who would like to engage with the farmer, they can't do it on a one-to-one basis. There are far too many farmers, they can't, it's an imperfect market that way. So what we need to do is organize farmers into farmer producer organizations, farmer producer companies, cooperatives, and whatever, so that there will be better, market linkages for their commodities, for their produce, and the aggregators also find it the transaction cost will be lower. Now, all that activity of organizing farmers, aggregating farmers through farmer producer groups, through farmer producer companies, cooperatives, would have to be done by the states. And obviously, the center doesn't have an agency to do that. So they would need strong support from the states, wholehearted support from the states. And unless states come on board, this reform might not work out, as we say. But we have seen that in the GST Council, we have been able to resolve problems amicably, harmoniously. Perhaps a mechanism like that for agri-policy coordination would be very helpful. Some people have, this suggestion has been on the table. So let's have an agri-policy coordination council at the central level where states would have a very strong voice, the center would have to listen to them, and the problems would get resolved. So that is basically the kind of way forward I would mention in this scenario. Now, whether the reforms that you have mentioned would work, let me, I vacillate between optimism and skepticism. Optimism because the supply side potentialities look quite promising, as Harish ji has mentioned, and he has possibly was the first one to mention it as a 1991 movement. So yes, it has the potential to become the 1991 movement, deregulation in many areas. But at the same time, we have seen in the past quite a few such reforms with the current government basically brought into effect, haven't really delivered. I would mention about ENAM, for example. I would mention about soil health card, and I would also mention about the Prime Minister's Fasal Bima Yojana. None of these have lived up to their potential. So I think optimism is absolutely I think a very justifiable feeling, but the skepticism also is there because given the past track record, and so we need to look at the fine print, the delivery mechanism, the interstate state center coordination. Only then I would say these reforms might work out. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thanks very much, Jugal. I think interesting. Your idea of something like a GST council, and then of course your feeling that you have a certain degree of optimism on this. I think those are very encouraging. Your idea on, or your point about the last mile land ownership issue, I think very, very interesting. Very interesting idea. But let's see how the discussion goes. Let me now move to Harish. Harish, let me say the essential commodities reforms. They include this deregulation of foodstuffs. You know about that. And even the Niti Aayog has been advocating this for over 2 years. You know, what were the challenges and sort of why did it take so long for this kind of thing to happen? And second, I mean, how do you think this will pan out? Do you think the middlemen will really continue to benefit out of this? Or how do you think the farmers can get the benefit out of it? Do they have the capacities for doing that? Is the infrastructure adequately available for doing that? Your thoughts around these issues, if you can.
I think, first of all, Jugal ji pointed out exactly at the reforms which didn't really take off. I mean, like we know about the ENAM, we know about the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, and about the soil health cards. So we should always, there should always be healthy skepticism, about what governments can achieve. But I think we have to accept the fact that number one, I think the farmer has been seen as an instrument. Number one, it was to produce whatever food, cheap food for the purposes of industrialization, right? I mean, in the 60s and 70s, he was seen as somebody who would produce wage goods for keeping the wages low, and to this thing. And I think that later on evolved into, then keeping inflation low. In fact, it was very tragic to see the RBI governor, just hardly 5-6 days back, saying that, we should slash import duties on pulses because of inflation. See, it's not the farmer's job to keep inflation low, that's not his job. I mean, I think that is where we need to look at the farmer as someone who's an economic agent, farmer for the farmer's sake, let the farmer earn. The farmer's well-being should be the ultimate goal. Let us look at the producer not as someone whose job is to either supply cheap wage goods or to keep inflation low, or to see that doesn't help in today's scenario. Especially, we have to accept that we have moved into a scenario of a permanent surplus. We are producing much more than what the market can absorb today. And even if, say, like I think Sarojji mentioned about onion. If onion prices are high, what happens is the farmer in the next season itself increases the production. So the consumer, the so-called consumer's misery is maximum one season. You can be assured that in the next season the production will go up. So the worst thing is to have a scenario where you have complete uncertainty. See, today the biggest risk for the farmer, more than weather uncertainty, is policy uncertainty. You don't know, tomorrow suddenly export control कर देंगे, या पहले बार इंडिया में ऐसे हुआ कि you have had income tax raids on onion traders, not asking whether you earned unearned income या आपने IT file नहीं किया, but whether you have stocked excess onions. ये तो पहले मर्तबा ये ऐसे हुआ है कि IT officer sniffing for onions. ये तो कभी नहीं हुआ है. So we need to get rid of that mentality altogether. We should accept the fact that if prices go up, the farmer will produce more, and the farmer's ability to respond, the supply response is much faster, much more than earlier. We haven't been able to flatten the COVID curve, but I can tell you that the supply curve in most farm commodities is flat now, has been flattened. It used to be vertical at one time. जो भी price होता था, production बढ़ता ही नहीं था. अब जो है, जब price बढ़ता है, production बढ़ता है. The farmer, so we should trust the Indian farmer to feed not only India, not only India, but even the world, and we should plan like that. See, I don't see, for example, India being competitive in any other sector other than IT and agriculture. And we have a locational advantage here. See, if you look at हमारे पास कौन है, बगल में बांग्लादेश है, ठीक है? Then you have Southeast Asia, which is all your Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia. See, then you have West Asia. Then you have even China. See, so these are all very, I mean, these are all markets near us, you know, and which we can, and if you look at the average distance, the voyage time from our ports to all these ports, including Japan, it is far closer than, you know, getting from Brazil and from Argentina. So we should look at as an agriculture as a sector by itself, not as a means to serve other sectors. हमारा ये प्रॉब्लम यही रहा है कि हम लोग हमेशा फार्मर को जो है, you know, for anything, फार्मर का बेटा जो है वो he will supply jawans to the border. Farmer will supply food to the nation. फार्मर का जॉब है टू टेक केयर ऑफ काउ, है ना, कि कल्चर भी फार्मर को देखना है. एनवायरनमेंट का जो है, ये पानी का जो है, ये सब जो है फार्मर ही रिस्पॉन्सिबल है. सो फार्मर क्या क्या करेगा, यू नो, इट इज वेरी डिफिकल्ट, एंड वी हैव टू एक्सेप्ट दैट दिस इज द फर्स्ट एवर national calamity, इतना बड़ा calamity में where people have not starved. You know, we have all got our milk. आप सोचिए ऐसे एक कैलामिटी में आपको जो है टमाटर जो है आपको 15 रुपया के लिए मिल रहा है. ये कभी नहीं हुआ है जो 70s में होता था. सी when your essential commodities act and all were done, उस टाइम पे होर्डिंग होता था. इस बार you tell me, has there been any hoarding? कोई hoarding नहीं हुआ है. In fact, they should be hoarding now. We should encourage. If tomorrow somebody wants to say, I want to tomorrow buy 1 million tons of chana, that person should be allowed, you know. And once, so therefore, that is why I'm saying supply side reforms are a good thing. Okay, this will have a long term thing. Right now, abhi jo hai demand ka problem hai, which we should address maybe through income transfer or something. Ye PM Kisan mein definitely, I think we can increase this thing. And in the long run, we should look at supply side reform. Let there be large investment, you know, and we should now behave like what the US was during the 30s and all. See, they invited large warehouses, you know, have large cold storage, have good this thing. See, अभी ये जो ये अपना जो है that dedicated freight corridor जो बन रहा है, इससे जो है, see, we can, you know, we will be able to supply our produce much faster anywhere. You know, so I think we should look at the next 5 years, and where we can look at agriculture as a way in which will generate jobs and incomes, and let farmers earn. We should move away from, you know, too much of pro-urban consumer to more to the rural producer, and that will generate income and that will generate maximum employment. I'm sure Sarojji will be able to explain that in a much better way than I am doing it. Thank you.
Thanks, Harish. Yes, I was planning to go to Sarojji next, but you know, I think fascinating points that you've raised. We've expected the farmer to do everything, and that obviously is not correct. What we have seen is whenever there's any kind of a calamity, the risk is entirely taken by the farmer, whether it's a, you know, monsoon failure or whether there is a supply of inputs failure. Whatever happens, it's the farmer who's really taken all the risk. And he's probably the least equipped to take that kind of risk. Yet the entire risk has really gone on him. We haven't thought of a system where the farmer can only be treated as one component of that whole value chain. He does the production, but the rest of the ecosystem takes a responsibility for sharing a lot of these risks. I think very interesting ideas that you've given on this. I think what you've also recognized is that there is a need for a lot more infrastructure to get built up to take full advantage of all of these. Thanks a lot for these, Harish. Let me now move to Sarojji. Sarojji, ये जो Essential Commodities Act में जो सुधार आया है, इसका फायदा उठाने के लिए फार्मर्स की कुछ कैपेसिटी बिल्डिंग करनी होगी. इसकी जरूरत है क्या? किस तरह की कैपेसिटी बिल्डिंग करनी होगी? क्या इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर में इम्प्रूवमेंट्स की जरूरत पड़ेगी? इन सब चीजों के बारे में थोड़ा आप अगर हमें बताएं. ये जो टेक्नोलॉजी, कुछ नई टेक्नोलॉजीज का फायदा उठा सकते हैं क्या? इस रिफॉर्म्स के कारण टेक्नोलॉजीज में क्या माने फार्मर्स का क्या फायदा उठा सकते हैं? इसके बारे में कुछ अगर आप बताएं हमें.
सबसे पहले तो मैं हरीश जी को धन्यवाद दूंगी कि उन्होंने काफी मात्रा में किसानों के बारे में बात कही है, कि जो सच है, यही सच है कि किसानों के लिए इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर अभी तक किसी बात का तो खड़ा हुआ ही नहीं। अगर ये एसेंशियल कमोडिटी एक्ट हटा दिया जाता है तो किसान यह करने के लिए तैयार है, उसको कोई भी प्रॉब्लम नहीं है, कोई भी समस्या नहीं है, क्योंकि इतनी बड़ी बड़ी समस्याएं आज 70 साल से हम लोग झेल रहे हैं, कोई भी नीति में बदलाव नहीं है। कम से कम अगर ये बदलाव आ गया, एसेंशियल कमोडिटी हटा दिया गया, तो हमारा जो उत्पाद है, हमारी जो उपज है, वो हमें बेचने का अधिकार होगा, वो हमें अपने पास रखने का अधिकार होगा। व्यापारियों ने अगर हमसे खरीदा तो उनको उनके पास रखने का अधिकार होगा। सर मैंने यही कहा था कि अभी पैच के बारे में, वैसे हर चीज के बारे में, जब तुअर ज्यादा कम मात्रा में हुई तो हमें तो देश के पंतप्रधान ने कहा कि बहुत तुअर उगाओ, किसान तुअर लगाने में जुट गए, बाकी पूरा क्षेत्र काम कर दिया कि नहीं हमारे देश में दलहन की कम है तो हमने दलहन ही उगाना चाहिए। और जब दलहन बड़ी मात्रा में पैमाने में उगाई तो हम लोगों ने बाहर से आयात कर लिया, इंपोर्ट कर लिया, और इंपोर्ट करके हमारा जो मार्केट बाहर था वो मार्केट भी हम बंद कर दिया। सर हमारा दूध वाले से हमारे गवर्नमेंट ने कुछ सीखना चाहिए। दूध वाला रोज हमें दूध देता है, अगर किसी दिन उसकी गाय दूध नहीं देती या भैंस दूध नहीं देती तो हमें आकर ये नहीं कहता कि हमारे गाय भैंस ने दूध नहीं दी, वो कहीं और कहीं से दूध जुटा लेता है, लेकिन हमें वो दूध देता ही है। उसी तरह अगर गवर्नमेंट ने उनकी आयात निर्यात नीति ठीक ढंग से रखी कि नहीं ये मार्केट हमारे लिए है, हमारे देश के प्याज के लिए बांग्लादेश, चाइना और जो भी कोई मार्केट है, ये मार्केट हमें ऐसे ही बरकरार रखना है, भले ही हमारे देश के नागरिकों को कुछ समय के लिए महंगा खाना पड़े। लेकिन अगर शहर वालों ने चिल्ला दिया कि हमारा बजट बिगड़ गया, सर मैं बजट के बारे में पूछना चाहती हूँ कि अगर हम 2 व्यक्ति 4 व्यक्ति महीने में अगर कितना भी खाए और अच्छी तरह से खाए तो भी 20,000 के ऊपर हमारा बजट खाने, 20 तो मैं बहुत ज्यादा कह रही हूँ सर, इससे भी कम बजट में हम खेती का अनाज खाते हैं, सब्जियां खाते हैं, सभी चीज खाते हैं। और कभी कभार अगर ये महंगाई बढ़ गई सर तो किसानों के लिए या इस देश के विकास के लिए, नॉट ओनली फार्मर, लेकिन इस देश का विकास तभी पॉसिबल है सर जब किसान के पास पैसे आएंगे। हमारे इस देश के किसान को टेक्नोलॉजी की आवश्यकता है, लेकिन टेक्नोलॉजी पे बैन है ना, देशांतर्गत हम वो टेक्नोलॉजी ज्यादा बढ़ा सकते हैं या उस टेक्नोलॉजी में सहभाग ले सकते हैं, उस पे भी बैन है। उसके लिए उन्होंने प्रोत्साहन देना चाहिए। बाहर देश से जो टेक्नोलॉजी आती है हमारे देश में, उस टेक्नोलॉजी पर भी बैन है। सर मोबाइल आया और मोबाइल के बहुत सारे वर्जन आ गए, उससे हम ये भी पढ़ रहे हैं कि इस मोबाइल से बहुत सारे नुकसान भी है, कोई के कान भी बहरे हो रहे, कहीं कुछ हो रहा, कहीं बच्चे बिगड़ रहे। लेकिन इसके बाद क्या हमने मोबाइल पर बैन कर दिया सर? अगर बाहर से कोई टेक्नोलॉजी आती है तो वो इस देश के विकास के ही लिए आती है, उसमें तो 2 साइड ही है। हाँ, अगर खेती में जो माल होता है उस माल का सीधा सीधा कंज्यूमर कंज्यूम करता है तो उसके हेल्थ पर परिणाम ना हो, ये सरकार सोचती है। इसके लिए कितने साल लगेंगे सर? 2 साल, 3 साल? अरे हमसे कहा गया कि बीटी कॉटन आने के बाद गैया और जो है वो नपुंसक हो जाएंगी, उनकी पैदावार नहीं होगी। सर कभी ऐसा हुआ है? हर जगह पैदावार बढ़ रही है सर, और कुछ भी लाकर उस किसानों के सर पे थोप देना, उसके लिए ना तो टेक्नोलॉजी देना ना इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर देना। इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर किसानों के लिए चाहिए, इस बारे में कई साल से हम सुन रहे सर, लेकिन अभी तक हमारे गांव में शहर तक जाने के लिए ठीक से रास्ते नहीं है। अभी तक हमारे गांव में रास्ते के अलावा ना कोई गोडाउन है, ना प्री कूलिंग की व्यवस्था है। अगर ये सब व्यवस्था गांव में की गई तो किसान हर हाल में इस देश को उबार सकता है और खुद की भी स्थिति वो उबार सकता है। इसमें मुझे 100% यकीन है सर। किसान को आप कच्चा खिलाड़ी मत समझिए, वो सब कुछ कर सकता है, और इसका अनुभव यहाँ पर जो भी लोग हैं उन सभी लोगों को है, क्योंकि आप लोगों ने काफी उसके बारे में पढ़ा भी है। और जो मैं 1980 से गांव-गांव में जाकर देखती हूँ उस किसान की हिम्मत, कि उसने उगाने के बाद भी उसकी चीजें जब उसके घर से निकाली जाती थी, किसान से कर्जा वसूला किया जाता था, उसके घर की पूरे बर्तन उठाकर ले जाया जाते थे, और जो रोकने के लिए हम आंदोलन के तहत गांव में पहुंचते थे, उस वक्त भी वो किसान खड़ा रहता था कि नहीं भाई, मैं अगले साल मेरी खेती बोने वाला हूँ। इस बार बारिश आई सर, मैंने अपने आंख से देखा कि पूरी खेती बह गई, और जब मैं उस राह से गुजर रही थी तो वो उसके बच्चों के साथ वो बही हुई खेती से बचे हुए पौधे खींच कर लाने की कोशिश कर रहा था। तो इतनी मेहनत, इतनी सब काम करने के बाद अगर आप उसको ये रिफॉर्म नहीं दोगे, अगर आप उसको जब जब उसके ऊपर नेशनल कैलेमिटीज आती है तब तब उसके बाजू में नहीं खड़े रहेंगे, उसके चीज का दाम अगर आप गिराते जाओगे, क्योंकि देश के बाकी लोगों को मुफ्त में खाना देना है। सर मुझे पीडीएफ या गरीबों को खाना देने में मुझे दिक्कत नहीं है, हम किसान लोग उतने बड़े दिल के, लेकिन सर क्या हमारे भरोसे अगर हमारा गेहूं 15 रुपए किलो बिकता है तो हमें कहा जाता है नहीं नहीं गरीबों को देना है, ये आपको 5 रुपए या 7 रुपए किलो में ही देना पड़ेगा गवर्नमेंट को। ये हम पर ज्यादती शुरू से होते आई है सर। मैंने बचपन में सुना था, मेरी दादी जब से खेती करती थी तो हमारे यहाँ ज्वार नहीं उगी, तो वहां पर तब लेवी देनी पड़ती थी सर। तो दादी ने कहा कि भाई अपने यहाँ ज्वार नहीं है लेकिन किसी से उधार लेकर आओ, नहीं तो कल तहसीलदार आएंगे और हमें जेल जाना पड़ेगा। तो ये किसान दिन जिंदगी भर इस देश के लिए खपता है, हम सबको खिलाता है, और हम उसके बदले में उसे क्या देते हैं कि अगर उसने थोड़ी भी हमारी वसूली नहीं दी तो हम उसे जेल तक ले जाने की कोशिश करते हैं, हम उसके घर के बर्तन भांडे भी उठा लेने की कोशिश करते हैं। वो तो मैं शरद जोशी जी को धन्यवाद देती हूँ कि जिन्होंने हमें ये उर्मी जगाई कि नहीं हम किसान भी स्वाभिमान से जिएंगे। हमें स्वतंत्रता चाहिए सर, हमें किसी भी सरकार की या किसी भी व्यक्ति की सहानुभूति नहीं चाहिए, हमें काम करने के लिए खुला मैदान चाहिए, खुला आकाश चाहिए, जिसके कारण हमें काम करते हैं। सर मैं नासिक का एक उदाहरण देना चाहूंगी आपको। वहां पर विलास शिंदे करके एक बंदा है जिसने नजदीक 75 एकड़ में एक बहुत बड़ा प्लांट खड़ा किया है और 25,000 किसान उसके भागीदार हैं। वो द्राक्ष अंगूर एक्सपोर्ट करता है। उसके बाद उसने धीरे धीरे टमाटर और आजू बाजू के किसानों की जो कुछ भी समस्या है वो सब समस्या समझिए। लेकिन सर वो यहाँ तक कैसा पहुंचा, उसने कहा कि फर्स्ट टाइम ताई मैंने 72 लाख का घाटा सहा, क्योंकि सभी सरकारी अफसर, जुगल जी मुझे माफ कीजिए लेकिन सरकारी अफसरों ने उसको 72 लाख के घाटे पर पहुंचाया, क्योंकि उसने तो गवर्नमेंट के नॉर्म्स के हिसाब से सब पूरा माल तैयार किया। वो कंटेनर लेकर गए, वो कंटेनर एक्सपोर्ट हो गए, वहां से वो रिजेक्ट होकर आ गए। और इसने कहा कि भाई आपने जो कुछ भी नॉर्म्स हमें बताए थे वो नॉर्म्स के हिसाब से ही हमने ये सब किया, तो ये कंटेनर वापस आ गया, मेरा 72 लाख का घाटा, ये कर्जा मैं कैसे चुकाऊंगा। तो सबने हाथ ऊपर कर लिए, कोई भी उसके पीछे खड़ा नहीं रहा। लेकिन वो शरद जोशी जी का नुमाइंदा, शरद जोशी जी के साथ उसने काम किया था। वो हिम्मत ना हारते हुए उसने एक बहुत बड़ा प्रोजेक्ट यहाँ पर खड़ा किया सर। अब वो द्राक्ष के हर सरकार का जो नियम है तो उसके तहत तो आपको जाना ही है कि तुम्हारे जो कोई नॉर्म्स है वो आप कागज मुझे दे दो, मैं मेरे लेबोरेटरी में वो सब नॉर्म्स तैयार करूंगा, आप सिर्फ आके मेरे पास साइन करना और इंडिया के बाहर जाने के पहले ही बताना कि ये माल ठीक है या नहीं है। अगर ये आप बता नहीं सकते तो आपको ड्यूटी करने की आवश्यकता नहीं है। इस तरह से बोलकर वो बंदा आगे बढ़ा, तो आज वो बड़ा काम कर रहा है सर। उसके लिए यहाँ प्री कूलिंग गोडाउन है, उसके यहाँ सब्जी भाजियां काटकर अभी इस पूरी कोविड के इसमें उसने पूरी नासिक, पुणे, मुंबई ऐसे जगह पर भेजा है। टमाटर के दाम जब 8 आने रुपया 2 रुपया होता है तब वो उन 25,000 किसानों से कहता है आजू बाजू के कि नहीं आप टमाटर मुझे 5 रुपए किलो में दो। यानी इस गिरे इसमें भी कम से कम 5 रुपए, सर 5 रुपए के लिए हम लोग तरस जाते हैं। तो ये स्थिति किसानों की देखना, यानी वहां जब गांव में जाते हैं और उनकी सब समस्याएं सुनते हैं सर, और उस समस्याओं से इसीलिए हमने जूझना सीखा। 15-15 दिन भले ही हम जेल में गए सर इस आंदोलन के कारण। क्या मांगा था हमने सिर्फ इतना मांगा था कि हमारे कपास का वाजिब दाम हमें चाहिए, और अगर आप नहीं देते हो तो हमें बाहर के मार्केट में बेचने की परमिशन चाहिए। लेकिन सर हमें उस परमिशन के लिए हमें 15 दिन जेल रहना पड़ा सर, कई बार हमें पुलिस के डंडे खाने पड़े सर। लेकिन मुझे खुशी इस बात की है कि आज इस रिफॉर्म का दौर चल रहा है। मुझे किसी ने कहा कि आशावादी होना चाहिए, मैं भी आशावादी ही हूँ, और आशावाद मैं यही रखती हूँ कि ये जो एसेंशियल कमोडिटी एक्ट लाया है, ये बीच में ही हो सकता है कि नेक्स्ट ईयर काफी बड़ा कहर आ जाए, कुछ उत्पादन कम हो और तुरंत किसान सरकार कह देगी कि नहीं नहीं किसान, तुम अभी महाराष्ट्र का किसान एमपी में अपना माल नहीं बेच सकता और हिंदुस्तान का किसान बाहर देश में माल नहीं बेच सकता। सर हमारा गला वहीं पर दबोचा जाता है और इसके कारण हम कर्जदार हो गए हैं। अभी कर्ज मुक्ति की बहुत सारी चर्चा चलती है सर, हर कोई शहरी व्यक्ति कहता है कि किसानों को तो हमने कितना सारा दिया। सर अभी जो 20 लाख करोड़ रुपए का पैकेज आया है ना सर, उसमें से किसानों को कितना मिला, ये अगर आप स्टडी करोगे तो 30,000 करोड़ रुपए कुछ किसानों को उन्होंने दिए हैं और उसमें से भी जो बैकडेट का कर्ज है वो कर्ज दे रहे हैं सर हमको, वो हमें अनुदान नहीं दे रहे हैं। जबकि शहरी लोग सोचेंगे कि ये अनुदान के तौर पर हमें दिया गया है, वो 2-2 लाख जो हमारे खाते पर वो जमा करेंगे सर, उसका बाकायदा ब्याज लेंगे और जब हमारे पास आएगा माल तब वो वहां से काट लेंगे। तो इस तरह से हमें नया का जुना, जैसे हम लोग अल्टर करके कपड़े पहनते ना सर, पुराने हो गए तो नए, इस बार कपास का दाम नहीं मिला तो पुराने ही पहनते हैं तो उसको सी कर पहनते हैं गाँव में। और वैसे ही ये अल्टर योजना कर्ज की हमारे लिए बनाई गई है कि इस साल नहीं दे रहे हैं भैया तो अगली साल तेरे को 4 लाख देना पड़ेगा। तो ये सब होते हुए किसान जब ये सब नहीं कर सकता, ना वो कुआं खोद सकता, ना वो खुद के खेत में गोडाउन बांध सकता, ना वो प्री कूलिंग की व्यवस्था कर सकता, अगर ये सब व्यवस्था, अगर ये सब इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर अगर सरकार तैयार करे तो सर मैं विश्वास के साथ कहती हूँ कि इस देश में बेरोजगारी का नाम नहीं रहेगा सर। आज भी खेती में इतनी ताकत है कि वो 50 मजदूर तो आराम से पाल सकते सर। पुरानी जमाने की खेती मुझे याद है कि 50-50 बैल की जोड़ियां रहती थी सर, 25 आदमी काम करते थे, कोई भी सरकार के पास गया नहीं कि साहब इस साल हमें खाना नहीं मिला आप दोगे क्या, वो जो किसान था वो किसान देता था। रहा सवाल बिचौलिया का, कई बार आप बिचौलिया कहते सर, व्यापार में तो व्यापारी लगेगा ही ना, हम लोग खेत में भी काम करेंगे और टोकरा सर पे लेकर शहर में भी बेचने जाएंगे, ये तो पॉसिबल नहीं है। हाँ अगर ये खुली व्यवस्था होती है तो जो एक ही दुकानदार है उसके 10 दुकान लगेंगे और हमें आत्मविश्वास के साथ कि नहीं मेरा माल मैं इस दाम में तुम्हें नहीं दूंगा। अगर श्लोका जी को नहीं जचना है तो मैं हरीश जी के पास जाऊंगी, हरीश जी को नहीं जचना तो मैं ओपी अग्रवाल के पास जाऊंगी, भाई इस दाम में मेरा माल है, तो उस माल को हमें हमारा दाम बताने का अधिकार प्राप्त होगा सर। इसलिए और कोऑपरेटिव पर तो हमें बिल्कुल भी विश्वास नहीं है सर। पूरे देश में सिर्फ एक ही कोऑपरेटिव सेक्टर है, वो है अमूल। बाकी तो हमारे महाराष्ट्र के कोऑपरेटिव सेक्टर के नाम से ही हम लोग रोने लगते हैं। हमारे यहाँ गन्ने का कोऑपरेटिव सेक्टर है, क्या है गन्ने की किसान की हालत, उन्हें पैसे समय पे नहीं मिलता। हमारे यहाँ सूतगिरनी कोऑपरेटिव है, क्या है हमारी हालत, हमारे कपास को ठीक से दाम नहीं मिलता, हमें सरकार से बार बार झगड़ा करना पड़ता है। अभी अभी हमें कपास के लिए आंदोलन करना पड़ा कि सीसीआई ने कपास की खरीदी करनी चाहिए, क्योंकि कोविड के चलते तहत पूरी मार्केट बंद हो गई सर, और जो व्यापारी हमसे 5,000 में माल खरीदी करता था उस व्यापारी ने भी खरीदी बंद कर दिया, तो हमें गवर्नमेंट को कहना पड़ता है। इसलिए जब जब ये ऐसी नेचुरल कैलामिटीज आएंगी तब तब सरकार ने किसान के पीछे खड़े रहना चाहिए, बस इतनी ही हमारी अपेक्षा है। बाकी अगर नॉर्मल सब चलता है कि हमारी खेती बह गई, हमारा उत्पादन ही नहीं आया, बारिशें ही नहीं आई, इस सब समय पर ही हमारे पीछे उन्होंने खड़े रहना चाहिए। अदरवाइज हम तो शायद कहते हैं कि सरकार यही समस्या है, सरकार समस्या क्या सुलझाए, सरकार यही समस्या है। सरकार जहां जहां हाथ डालती सर वहां वहां तो बस बंटा ढा रही है। नमस्ते सर।
शुक्रिया। सरकार ही सारा प्रॉब्लम है पर ये चीज आपने बड़ा अच्छा कहा कि इतना कोविड में इतना सब हुआ लेकिन हमें खाना मिलता रहा, टमाटर हमको कम दाम में मिलता रहा, जैसे हरीश जी बोल रहे हैं। ये चीज हम लोगों ने डॉक्टरों को ताली बजाया, काफी मैंने बहुत अच्छा काम किया, हमने उनको रिकॉग्नाइज किया, उनके लिए ताली बजाया। ये चीज हम भूल गए कि फार्मर्स ने भी हमको इतना मदद किया, वो चीज हम भूल गए थे। मेरे ख्याल से ये भी जरूर आना चाहिए। ये हम लोगों ने ये सोच लिया था ये तो आएगा ही, लेकिन किस लिए आएगा वो चीज हम भूल गए थे। बहुत अच्छी बात कही आपने। मैं अब श्लोका जी के पास जाता हूँ। श्लोका, you have been involved with climate change, vulnerability in the agriculture sector also. And in the COVID scenario, what do you think, will this get aggravated further? Will there be, some improvement as a result of this COVID in the climate change scenario and the climate change vulnerability? That is one question I would ask. And the other is, you are managing a fairly significant fund, non-government fund on the agriculture sector, rural sector, on climate vulnerability. With these reforms, do you see a possible change in your focus, or do you think you'll be able to deepen your existing work? Does it sort of strengthen the work that you're already doing? Could you share some of those thoughts with us?
Sure, of course, OP. And I think the panelists have spoken so passionately. And I think there's a lot of sort of really key perspectives that have come out. I'll try and touch on those as well, based on what Harish has said, what Sarojini ji has said, and of course, Jugal ji. I think firstly, just in the context of climate change as well as the coronavirus pandemic, I think the first thing I want to say is that the economic decline due to COVID-19 and this crisis really presents India with a rare glimpse of the magnitude of transformation which is going to be required in the coming decade to deal with this other looming threat, which is climate change. So I suppose it's a really, it's a moment of reflection to think about how we're going to deal with these oncoming global shocks. COVID-19 did cause runs on local food markets worldwide, and people had to seek out, means by which to ensure the health and well-being of their family. Food security really has it hasn't been more critical. However, India's agriculture sector, as all of my panelists have pointed out, which employs half of India's total workforce, is reeling from severe distress. So we have a threefold rise in rainfall events. We have increased droughts. We have all of which are primarily due to climate change. And they've, reduced crop yields and has caused about $9 to $10 billion in damage per year to the agriculture industry alone as a result of climate change. So making India's agriculture system climate resilient should be of extreme importance to any broader recovery plan that we come up with. And I think what I want to bring out in this perspective really is the interconnectedness of disruptions that is what is really concerning. So smallholder farmers in particular really were in fact staring at 2 loss-making cropping seasons in a row when the coronavirus pandemic hit them. So you had current crop damages, which followed the losses farmers suffered during the 2019 autumn harvest. So the southwest monsoons were extremely erratic last year. You had prolonged dry spells in June and July, which were followed by very heavy rainfalls in August and September. And that really hit the smallholder farmers. Then before the lockdown, which led to labor shortages and brought, transportation of farm produce to a virtual halt, farmers were staring at losses in the winter harvest due to unusually heavy rainfall in March that flattened the crop in many locations across the country. And I think there were, news stories and reports in one province of Uttar Pradesh alone. Crops worth nearly, $35 million were damaged by hailstorms in 35 districts by the middle of March, which affected more than 500,000 farmers. So now peak harvesting season has been hit by the COVID-19 pandemic, with farmers unable to reap whatever they've managed to survive because they can't find either laborers to do the harvesting or transport to take the produce to market. Not to mention, and I've seen this in the chat, a number of people have asked, this question, we now have desert locusts, which are descending upon a number of Indian states. And this is because of abnormally heavy rainfalls, which I mentioned, took place last year. These rainfalls actually took place as a result of a long-term warming of the Indian Ocean, which is a hallmark of climate change. And that's exacerbated this locust infestation across Eastern Africa. And they're spreading to places where earlier the climate wasn't suitable, but now it is. So as a result, India is now suffering we're now suffering our worst locust swarm attack in decades. So my point is, and the reason I've gone into so much detail about this is because we're really experiencing systemic shocks, which are starting to really affect each other. And it's the multiplicity and the interconnectedness of those shocks, which is what is landing on the lap of the Indian farmer today. The other point that I want to point out also is that a majority of the workers of farms or these farmers tend to be female. And so there's a very strong gender component to this as well. You will now have a situation where you have reverse migration. A lot of people from the cities going back to their farmlands. And there's a big question around whether or not that's going to take away their income. And unlike other sectors, they don't have any savings to fall back on. So these are some of the sort of really prescient or prominent questions, I would say, that we really have to focus on and think about as we look to sort of build back resilience and recovery. From sort of a general sustainability or climate perspective, I think there are three things I would really sort of push forward in terms of, what we should be looking at with the reforms. One is building rural resilience. So there has to be a focus on local self-reliance and rural resilience. We have to ensure that COVID-induced supply chain breakdowns will lead to actually establishing local markets and more rural self-reliance. I think all of the panelists here tonight have brought this point up, and we really need to question how these reforms are going to contribute towards that. There also should be an added focus on vocational training and entrepreneurship. Capacity building is something that, again, Harish also brought up repeatedly. So we need investment of development finance and stimulus funding in the form of failure money to experiment with local models and solutions. I think that's going to be key. We need mechanisms to ensure farmers get a fair price. There must be more uniform systems of sorting, grading, pricing. I think the reforms don't clearly address two glaring farm profitability obstacles and vulnerabilities, which is access to water. And that's going to be a huge upcoming focus, especially within the climate change conversation. And of course, the second is access to formal credit that will continue to hinder farmer resilience and incomes. The second point I want to talk about is there has to be support towards sustainable and certified produce. Whether that's organic or fair trade, we have to really encourage and incentivize sustainable production for contract farming. So, contract farming by default does promote monoculture cultivation and a high output productivity, sometimes linked to a lot of increased chemical usage. So we have to be careful about that. And we have to ensure that, the contract farming licenses are conditional. They should be provided to ensure crop diversification, which again is something both Jugulji and Harish have brought up. Nutritional security, soil health, optimal chemical use, sustainable water use, prevention of land degradation. The other thing is we have to also, I think, focus on direct selling to the fact that direct selling to private buyers will strengthen backward linkages. And that could also further enable, filling in some of these systemic gaps. So, a really critical link which is missing in scaling up certified sustainable produce is you need transparent systems. So maybe direct selling will ensure something like that will, take place. And private sector investment in this sector can really strengthen the farm to fork chain. It can provide consumers with food safe produce. Direct selling can also eliminate the value capturing middleman. It can substitute that with a farmer-centric producer organization, a cooperative or an aggregator. And the third point I want to make is around conditional liberalization. So this notion of sort of privatization or liberalization with protection. We need to use a political economy approach to avoid really unintended outcomes. What we've seen with the Green Revolution, and again, my panelists have brought up this point again and again. We need a regular review of policy outcomes, a committee that will regularly evaluate social and environmental externalities of these policy implications is going to be really key. A good example of this is the DFI committee, which is led by Ashok Dalwai. And I think, finally on the point around conditional liberalization, I would say building warehouses and cold supply chains should really be farmer friendly rather than exclusive to the private sector, so that they can also make economic choices. And this actually comes back to something Harish was just saying, which is something I really strongly believe as someone who has one foot in civil society and one foot very much with an eye on the private sector and what they're doing. And I think the aim and the hope of our work is really trying to bring both these forces together. I think something that I've realized is that we continue to treat the farmer like a beneficiary, and the farmer is a customer. Beneficiary is not a mere word, it's a mindset that permeates governments as well as, NGOs. And for me, the image that the word beneficiary evokes is one that implies a benefactor, the generous one. And a beneficiary is not empowered to control what affects it. A customer can affect decision-making. A customer's voice is not heard in philanthropy or in aid. A customer's voice is one in which is a voice around which the entire ecosystem is organized and oriented. And that's what really needs to happen in agriculture in India today. I do have a lot more points that I could make around sort of, the need to provide access to information, to transfer, knowledge about these reforms and to assist producer communities in taking advantage of the opportunities. Some of the work that civil society is really sort of good at doing, because just for example, we've announced these reforms, but, just because we've announced it, that doesn't mean that farmers on the ground have heard the message. The agri sector is very disaggregated, and these reforms will get to them very, very slowly. So, these opportunities may only reach them 6 to 7 months later. And NGOs and civil society will play a huge role in transferring that knowledge faster. The idea that they can be their own processors, for instance. So this will all, this is where civil society plays a huge role. On contract farming, I think that's a larger point. I can get into the details now, OP, if you'd like. But it is a real opportunity to improve the relationship between the buyer and the farmer. And I think it will improve or remove rather the fragmentation of the profit shares due to the presence of many middlemen, which we've all spoken about. But of course, there's a lot of sort of contextual framing around that, issues that we need to look out for and what I'd like to see, even given the legal provisions that the government has put out. I think the government will have to include provisions that will ensure securities to growers. We do require the buyers and the users to enter into a long-term contract that would ensure additional investments to improve productivity and quality. I think secondly, we have to avoid monopolistic situations in contract farming, because one company entering into an agreement with a large number of farmers puts the growers at a disadvantage. Third, the contract needs to cover the farmers' production risks. I think earlier when we tried, different examples of contract farming in India, the agreements tended to protect the company's interests rather than the growers. And finally, the center needs to have a provision for the registration of contracts with an authorized agency. That's something that has been lacking throughout. The agency can check the track record of these firms and enter into an agreement to ensure that, at the end of the day, farmers are not affected by companies that spring up overnight. So there's a lot. I would just, come back to this point that the reforms have definitely, they're in the right direction. But, many a slip between the cup and the lip. There are, the reforms are one step, but implementation is going to be the next. And there's a lot for us to sort of figure out and see what we can do, both from the perspective of civil society as well as, of course, the corporate sector.
Thanks, Shloka. I think the key message I'll take away from this is, yes, the reforms are in the right direction, but there's a lot more that has to be done. And this is where civil society can play a very important role. I think the whole issue of capacity building that you also mentioned, the climate resilience that you also mentioned, I think very interesting point. We are actually running out of time, but I wanted to give enough time for some question and answers. So why don't I pass it over to Jayhari, if you can just coordinate the question and answer session, and then we'll give each of the speakers a minute each, the last minute each. So Jayhari, over to you.
Thank you very much, OP, and thanks a lot for the panelists for an interesting discussion. There are a set of questions are there which have came from our participants. I am just bringing it to each of you one by one. So the first question is to Mr. Jugal Mahapatra. It's from Mr. Vijay Kumar. His question is precisely about using MGNREGA as a means for transferring the cash to the rural poor during this situation. And the question is precisely to that, in a way like the 100 days should be increased to 150 days or more. And, how much we can leverage from MGNREGA at this point of time. Second question to you, sir, is from Mahak. Do you think the problem of MSP for paddy and wheat needs to be looked at this situation, in the backdrop of this, ENAM changes kind of things? And the third question comes from Sohair. It's about the driver of overexploitation. It's water, overexploitation of water is another driver for the unsustainability of agriculture sector, and it's one reason is because of the electricity subsidies and all. And how do we see these things? So precisely, sir, in and the 2-3 minutes, if you can answer these 3 questions, would be great. I'll come back to the other panelists after this.
Okay, I'll start with MGNREGA. It's a conditional cash transfer scheme. you perform some unskilled manual work and you get paid. So it's a conditional cash transfer scheme in that sense. Now, how does it help agriculture? Now, I think there is already a focus that 60% of work under NREGA should be devoted, targeted at water conservation, increasing agricultural productivity, and so on. Now, and also the permissible works is so elastic that practically any land improvement, any productivity enhancement, asset creation you can undertake in the farmer's field, particularly of those belonging to small marginal landless tribal middle class category. So, which is bulk of the farmers, nearly 85% farmers of the country. In addition to that, I think there is a focus on creating farm ponds and also the organic composting. So these are things that really help agriculture in improving agricultural productivity and making more sustainable agriculture. So these are there. Of course, there is an issue relating to whether NREGA should be used for subsidizing farm labor costs. A very different issue. I won't get into that now. Now, the second issue, what did you mention? Can you repeat this? Can you repeat the second question? I lost the thread.
I will. The second question is about this, MSP, the connection between the MSP and the INAM resources, like MSP for paddy and wheat need to be looked at if the Indian government intends to work on building the sustainable agriculture in India. So precisely the question comes in a way like the INAM, how the INAM reforms will have an impact on this, the present ongoing MSP program, especially on rice and wheat.
Okay, INAM, I think its coverage is far too limited now. Very, very limited. About 10% of APMCs are covered by INAM. So I think the effort should be to get more and more APMCs on board into the INAM, which will provide a platform for those commodities which are not really well protected in terms of procurement interventions. Rice and wheat are fine because these are two best protected in terms of FCI procuring from major states at least. So, but other crops, other 20 crops hardly get any support, although there is MSP. So for those crops, MSP is only theoretical. There is no procurement agency intervening in the market. So INAM possibly can provide an opportunity for getting better price discovery at least. So that's something that would be very, very important. And the third question, again, can you remind me?
The third question is about the water problem, the sustainability issues because of heavy water places.
See, the water and electricity both need to be priced correctly. So, but the point is that then how does the farmer become? I think there has to be some compensatory mechanism, and there are good models which have been given by agricultural economists, and so that farmers don't feel the pinch, and yet they respond to the correct market prices and go for the right cropping thing. So I think they should not get analyzed in the crop diversification, like what Telangana government is trying to do. Tell the farmer this is what you will do. That's not going to work. Send the correct signals. The prices should send the correct signals. But if there is a loss to the farmers, compensated so that's doable, and the concrete proposals are already there to Punjab and Haryana and all that. So I think that can be addressed without adversely affecting the farmers' interests.
Thank you very much, sir. Saurav ji, आपके लिए दो questions आया है. एक है कि फार्मर्स का ये कॉस्ट ऑफ प्रोडक्शन इंक्रीज बढ़ते रहते हैं और आपका रिटर्न तो कम होते रहते हैं, एंड इस अभी का ये रिफॉर्म्स और अभी का सिनेरियो में आप क्या बोलना चाहते हैं कि हाउ टू इंक्रीज ए फार्मर्स का रिटर्न कैसे इंक्रीज करेगा, और इसके लिए कुछ सजेशन अभी का रिफॉर्म्स से आप एक्सपेक्ट करते हैं और नहीं, और क्या करना पड़ेगा इसके लिए. और आपके लिए एक सेकंड क्वेश्चन भी है, वो कनेक्टेड भी है. अभी तो इतना रिफॉर्म्स में एक क्वेश्चन इज फ्रॉम अनुक्रम अधिकारी। उनका फियर क्या है कि बहुत बड़ा इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर बनाएगा और फार्मर्स का प्रोड्यूस ऑल अक्रॉस द कंट्री सेल हो जाएगा एंड उनका डिस्ट्रीब्यूशन इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर भी बहुत स्ट्रेंथन हो जाएगा। इस समय उनका डाउट क्या है कि ये अमेज़न की तरह और इसकी तरह लाइक वो प्राइवेट इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर बिल्ड करने का कैपेसिटी जिनको है वो ये सेक्टर को कंप्लीटली टेक ओवर करेगा क्या? सो ये बहुत कनेक्टेड है आपका रिटर्न का और ये फियर का। आप आंसर कर सकते हैं।
उसका जो उत्पादन खर्च है वो बढ़ते जा रहा है, ये जो कहा गया है, तो वो बढ़ते तो जा रहा है सर, क्योंकि नई नई जो टेक्नोलॉजी है वो उसके पास आ नहीं रही है। जैसे कि अभी हमने जीएम क्रॉप अगर उसको मिल जाता है सही मायने में, पूरे उसको परमिशन मिलती है, तो उसका कुछ खर्च सर कम हो सकता है। जैसे कि अगर अभी तक जीएम में बीटी बीज नहीं था जब तक देश में, तब किसानों को बहुत ज्यादा दवाइयां छिड़कनी पड़ती थी, और जब से जीएम क्रॉप आ गए तब से हमें दवाइयां छिड़कने का खर्च हमारा कुछ कम हो गया और हमारा ईल्ड भी बढ़ गया। जैसे जैसे इन सब टेक्नोलॉजी के सहायता से किसानों का अगर ईल्ड बढ़ता है तो उसका उत्पादन खर्च ज्यादा बढ़ेगा ऐसा मुझे नहीं लगता। लेकिन हाँ, अभी फिलहाल ये उत्पादन खर्च उसका बढ़ रहा है क्योंकि मजदूरी भी बहुत महंगी हो चुकी है। 200 रुपए 250 रुपए कम से कम महिलाओं की मजदूरी है, 200 से 250, और 350 रुपए तक वहां के मजदूर की, पुरुष की मजदूरी है। तो इस तरह की इस मजदूरी में छोटे फार्मर्स का बहुत ही घाटा होता है। और ये छोटा फार्मर क्यों आ गया, ये तो आपको बताया गया है कि लैंड सीलिंग एक्ट से लेकर तो अभी तक हम लोग छोटे छोटे ही होते जा रहे हैं सर। और दूसरा जो कहा गया है कि बड़ी बड़ी कंपनियां आकर ये बिजनेस हैंडल कर लेंगी, तो सर किसी को भी बिजनेस तो हैंडल करना है ना। जहां का सरकार व्यापारी होता है वहां की प्रजा भिखारी होती है। तो सरकार के सभी नुमाइंदे ने बिजनेस के चक्कर में क्यों पड़ना चाहिए। उन्होंने सीधा जो कुछ भी कंपनियां हैं उन कंपनियों को अगर हमें जचेगा तो हम माल देंगे, क्योंकि हमारे माल का दाम भी हमने बताना चाहिए, ऐसी इस रिफॉर्म में बताया गया है। लेकिन हम हमारे माल का दाम तभी कह सकेंगे ना जब आपके जैसे 10 लोग हमारे पास माल खरीदने के लिए आएंगे तब। अगर एक ही सरकार ने कह दिया है कि नहीं ये एमएसपी है, ये इसके ऊपर आपका माल लिया नहीं जाएगा, तो बाकी भी मार्केट में हमारा माल नहीं लिया जाता। तो ये जो सारी कंपनियों का हवा खड़ा कर रहे हैं सर, मेरे ख्याल से ये हवा है, इसके लिए डरने की कोई आवश्यकता नहीं है और किसान इसके लिए तैयार है। हाँ, आज कहेंगे कि आज इसी क्षण गांव का हर किसान क्या व्यापार जानेगा, लेकिन गांव के जो बच्चे हैं जो आजकल मोबाइल ऐप के द्वारा बिजनेस करना सीख रहे हैं सर, इसके लिए एक बहुत बड़ा चांस उनको मिलेगा कि अगर वो उनका माल आज हम वर्धा में है, वर्धा का माल नागपुर का माल छिंदवाड़ा एमपी यूपी बॉर्डर तक जा सकता है, इस बात की उनको जानकारी मिलेगी। और वो खुद अगर नहीं गए तो भी ये जो बड़ी बड़ी कंपनियां हैं इनके माध्यम से डायरेक्ट फार्म टू फोर्क, ये हमारी पॉलिसी है, हमारे फार्म में तैयार हुआ माल लोगों के फोर्क तक जाना चाहिए। और हम चाहते हैं कि इसमें ग्राहक का भी भला है और किसानों को भी भला है, हमें भी कुछ पैसे मिलेंगे और ग्राहक को भी वाजिब दाम में उनका माल मिलेगा। हाँ, जब कोई, मैंने तभी भी कहा कि नेचर का कोई डिसास्टर होता है उस समय हमें खड़े रहना पड़ता, सरकार को किसान के साथ खड़े रहना पड़ता है, ये जरूरी है। लेकिन जब तक स्मूथ चल रहा है किसान ये सभी चीजें हैंडल कर लेगा। और मुझे यकीन है जितना भी मैंने 40 साल से इन किसानों के, महिलाओं के साथ, किसान पुरुषों के साथ काम किया है, उनको खेती में काम करते देखा है, उनको मार्केट करते देखा है, तो मुझे विश्वास है कि उनको कोई लूट नहीं पाएगा। जो एक डर है कि बिचौलिया उन्हें लूट लेंगे, तो सर एक लूटेगा लेकिन उसको सबक सिखाने के लिए 10 किसान अगर इकट्ठे आ गए तो उन्हें बिचौलिया नहीं लूटेगा, ऐसा मुझे लगता है। और जीएम टेक्नोलॉजी, जो कुछ भी टेक्नोलॉजी है वो टेक्नोलॉजी की आवश्यकता है जिसके कारण हमारा उत्पादन खर्च कुछ कम होगा।
Thank you, Kashika ji. There are a set of questions to you also, Shloka. Some of them, in between you have answered, but there are a couple of other things. Which one is from Dr. Seema Pool. Her question is like, how does agroforestry figure in all these things? Because the both the livelihoods perspective and the climate perspective, this is a very important, component. And there are so many barriers. And do the panelists have any view on this, agroforestry? Number one. The second question, which we haven't answered so far in price, is about the price consciousness of Indian customers. How do you see, how do you see playing out? Then becomes an list, and also what body actually certifies organic products in India? So basically, the kind of the question is like the price consciousness of Indian customers, and to satisfy their expectations when paying a higher price. Are is the existing certification systems and quality assurance systems are enough? And the last question is about, there is one question: do you support GM food or not? Which optional, whether you want to answer it or not, but the questions have come. So any examples of contract farming has resulted in sustainable outcomes in India? So these are the three questions plus one optional question to you. Please.
Okay, thank you so much. So maybe I can start with agroforestry, and it's lovely that Seema is asking. I, of course, know Seema really well. Thank you for the question. So the point on agroforestry is a really important one. I think it's a great option to, diversify incomes. It needs to be feasible. We need to have a proper assessment of agroecological systems, which I think has to be done. And it's a wonderful option when attempting to reverse land degradation while providing livelihood. So there's a very strong sort of climate linkage and story there as well. I think the benefits are that agroforestry can control runoff and soil erosion, and it does reduce a great amount of lossage of water, soil material, organic matter, and nutrients. You can actually capture all of these through agroforestry outcomes. Agroforestry also can maintain soil organic matter and biological activity at really sort of satisfactory levels for soil fertility. So I think this really, it depends on sort of how, if you have an adequate proportion of trees in the system. I think normally at least 20% crown cover of trees to maintain organic matter over the system as a whole is what's needed. And agroforestry can also provide a more diversified farm economy and stimulate the whole rural economy, leading to more stable farms and communities. I think economic risks are really reduced when systems produce multiple products. So that's the answer on agroforestry. I absolutely think it's definitely a great option and has huge potential for India. I think the second question that I remember you asking was around the example of contract farming with sustainable outcomes. I think more than contract farming in India, there's examples of connected buyer-grower relationships. So you do have the great example of organic cotton by Chetna Organics in Maharashtra and MP. And they set up their own FPO. They captured the international market for sustainable cotton. It's not yet scalable, but hopefully, reforms will help, as it requires a lot of sort of investment of private companies. But that's the hope, and that's a great example, I think, of sustainable outcomes that can be achieved, but do need to be scaled. I think your third point on price consciousness of Indian consumers, that's an interesting question. I think you have to really achieve economies of scale around sustainable produce. This is just what I was referring to with Chetna Organic as well. It needs to be focused. I think right now, sustainable produce in India needs to be focused primarily on food safety. And that's the really evolving requirement of the Indian customer or consumer. And the optimal management of chemicals is also beneficial to the consumer, but I think it's equally sort of optimal or a huge priority for the farmer because it ensures, soil health improvements. So that's the answer on the price consciousness. I hope I've answered all three.
Thank you very much, Shloka. You have answered all the three. In fact, Harish has in between left out, and there are two questions focusing to him. Either Mr. Mahapatra or Shloka can attend this if as you would like. The question is basically from it's from Nambi Appadurai. What are the key barriers in removing the interstate trade perceived by the panelists? So it's looking towards the key barriers, and Second question from him only is about overall, this reforms are silent about urban farming, which is very important. And do you think it is very important? It has to be addressed, like the rural agriculture sector, or it can be just, left like this for the time being? The another question to Harish, it was about the cold storage capacity. India has the largest cold storage capacity already here. And what kind of a change we are looking, in this cold storage, overall this infrastructure building, how it can be value added, and what's the exact, measures which we are looking for value adding to the cold storage infrastructure. So this was a question. So one of you, or you can take one each.
Can you tell me again all these questions?
It's about ये तो cold storage के ऊपर थे. इंडिया में अभी ही cold storage का infrastructure enough available है. अभी क्या change करना पड़ेगा इसमें ये cold storage के cold storage का infrastructure sector पे. और second ये है कि interstate trade ये interstate what ये interstate trade का वो problem निकालने के लिए क्या barrier होता है, like क्या problem होता है, क्या पहले करना पड़ेगा वो interstate trade allow करने के लिए. So ये है दो question.
Can I?
I'll take the interest, sir. Ma'am, आप बोलना चाहेंगे?
आप बोलना चाहिए, आप बोलिए पहले.
Let me take the interstate trade.
Sure.
See, under the current law, the trading in agricultural commodities can take place only within that APMC, the mandi. So that's so people have to get a license from the mandi, pay the mandi fees, and sell in that mandi. So anybody can't go and buy or sell there. So if a Punjab aggregator comes to Maharashtra, certainly he cannot enter the mandi and do that. So that freedom is not there. Now, so therefore, one barrier is that complete restriction in buying and selling under the APMC Act for the notified commodities. So that's that this particular central law will provide an opportunity. Of course, mandis will remain, but notwithstanding the mandis, people from other states can come to these production centers, buy and transport the commodity to the consuming center. So that is the intention behind this, and the law, as I said, the entry secretary of the currently will enable the central government to enact this law, and I think it will liberate the farmer from the clutches of the mandis, and it will be a very beneficial reform. Thank you.
Thank you. So काशिका जी quickly एक दो मिनट में अभी हमारा टाइम.
हाँ जी, मैं तो जो आप कह रहे हैं कि कोल्ड स्टोरेज बहुत सारे तादाद में है, लेकिन हमारे ग्रामीण क्षेत्र में तो हमें कोल्ड स्टोरेज कहीं दिखाई नहीं दे रहे जिसकी हमें जरूरत है. दूसरा जो इंटर स्टेट का जो कहा है, तो लाइसेंस परमिट राज जब तक है तब तक ये इंटर स्टेट का जो है माल बेचना खरीदना ये होना मुश्किल है. एपीएमसी में हर प्रांत के लोग आकर माल खरीदेंगे, लेकिन उनके पास हर बार उन्हें लाइसेंस परमिट के लिए रोका जाएगा या नहीं, ये मुझे जुगल जी ने क्लियर करना चाहिए. और इन सब बातों के लिए किसान सक्षम है, किसान तैयार है और वो ये सब बातें करेगा. इतना मैं आपको किसान की तरफ से आश्वस्त करती हूँ.
Thank you. There is, I'm conscious about time. Shloka, you would like to address this question about urban farming?
Urban farming, I think it's interesting, but the participants have sort of answered it themselves. I think it's a growing area. It's one that, rooftop farming, I think, is what they were referring to. And that's something that we're looking at very strongly. So urban plots and urban farming, of course, the biggest problem in India is one of space. But, you are going to see, I think, a lot of, hopefully, fingers crossed, potential movement there going forward. But I would have answered exactly what they said, which is it's urban rooftops right now in most of our cities. And hopefully with green infrastructure and the movement, forward around sort of green buildings, a lot of, it's not just using sustainable raw materials, but it is going to mean implementing sort of rooftop gardens and greening infrastructure as much as we can as well.
Thank you very much, Shloka. Somehow, Dr. Api Agarwal has been logged out and he was trying to come back, but we have finished exactly at 7:03. It was an interesting discussion, and I think it's a good participation. We have around 130 people just were listening to us, and till 7 o'clock. I thank you all, Sarojji, Apkobi, and Mr. Mahapatra sir and Shloka, and I thank all the participants for their questions and their involvement. And I should apologize for certain hacking or spamming, some disturbances happen in the chat box, which we will take care hereafter. As I told you, this is our inaugural session of this series. Thank you very much, everyone. It was a wonderful evening and a wonderful discussion. Good evening and good night. Thank you.